Thank you, Dick. Nothing against Jiminy Cricket, but that sure beat When You Wish Upon a Star. I can't tell you how lucky I am to be up here and to have all of you here this morning with us. My sermon today is on lessons learned. So for a reading, I searched the internet and came across a web page that listed answers to the question, what have you learned in life? And I picked a few of those answers from people of varied ages in ascending order. So from someone age 6, I've learned that you can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. From a 12-year-old, I've learned that just when I get my room the way I like it, Mom makes me clean it up. From a 13-year-old, I've learned that if you want to cheer yourself up, you should try cheering someone else up. This from a 13-year-old. From someone age 29, I've learned that wherever I go, the world's worst drivers have followed me there. From a 39-year-old, I've learned that if someone says something unkind about me, I must live so that no one will believe it. From someone age 46, I've learned that children and grandparents are natural allies. From a 49-year-old, I've learned that singing Amazing Grace can lift my spirits for hours. From someone age 50, I've learned that motel mattresses are better on the side away from the phone. If anyone can explain that to me, please see me afterwards. From someone age 52, I've learned that you can tell a lot about a man by the way he handles these 3 things: a rainy day, lost luggage, and tangled Christmas tree lights. From someone age 62, I've learned that life sometimes gives you a second chance. From a 64-year-old, I've learned that you shouldn't go through life with a catcher's mitt on both hands. You need to be able to throw something back. From someone age 72, I've learned that everyone can use a prayer. From someone age 82, I've learned that even when I have pains, I don't have to be one. And finally, from someone age 92, I've learned that I still have a lot to learn. Thus ends the reading. Thank you, Dick. I have a confession to make. I lead a double life. Yes, it's true. By day, I am a mild-mannered 20-year veteran of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County. But at night, I turn into growth consultant for the Central East region of the Unitarian Universalist Association. For over 4 years, I've managed to keep my 2 lives pretty separate. One of the reasons for doing so is obvious: to avoid potential conflicts of interest or the appearance of showing favoritism to my home congregation. The other reason is more personal. In my work as a consultant, I need to be objective. I need to maintain a presence that enables me to hold up a mirror so that congregations can see themselves, their strengths, their challenges, and so are able to take action to become stronger, more vital, and growing congregations. At least that's what I hope I'm doing. But here at UUCDC, I can be myself. I can let my hair down, metaphorically speaking. I can boast. I can criticize. I can be subjective. I can be subjective. But today, for the first time in over 4 years, I am publicly acknowledging my 2 lives and boldly allowing them to intersect. Today, I would like to share with you the lessons that I have learned in my work with dozens of congregations, from the tip of Long Island to Eastern Ohio, from the St. Lawrence Seaway to Northern Virginia. I share these insights with you not as an expert, but as someone who has been blessed with the opportunity to stand on the balcony and watch, listen, and participate as our Unitarian Universalist congregations strive struggle, and triumph in the furtherance of our faith and in creating life-saving and life-fulfilling homes for their members. I will also be audacious enough today to offer some perspective on where I think our beloved community fits in relation to the congregations with whom I have worked, and to offer general suggestions and ideas for how we can continue to be a strong and progressive congregation, and one that I am so proud to be a member of. Lesson learned number one. Having a mission will not solve all your problems, but not having a mission or not living your mission will guarantee to produce more problems. The mission of UUCDC, to nourish the spirit and mind, to build a just and sustainable world, is noble indeed, but it must be more than words. It must guide everything that we do as we move forward. Tom Beloit, minister of the Shawnee Mission UU Church in Overland Park, Kansas, speaks of mission as the need for members of a congregation to be aligned in a common purpose, to be articulate about why they exist and what they are in the world to do, and to achieve clarity in this understanding. Referring to the concept of mission, the Reverend David Bumbaugh asks, what do we believe? Whom do we serve? To whom or what are we responsible? Those are the questions with which every viable religious movement must wrestle. So long as those essential questions remain unaddressed, he concludes, the dream will remain unfulfilled. And David Owen O'Quill, community minister from the Chicago area, writes that mission is not a statement. Mission is the reason you exist. Mission is outward-focused, not self-focused. It is building a bridge between our faith and the people we seek to reach. So as we continue to build this community, we need to be looking to our mission. We need to be guided by it. We need to be inspired by it. And if we are not, we need to change it. Lesson learned number two. Congregations are probably not as welcoming as they think they are, and definitely not as welcoming as they need to be. Writing in the spring 2012 issue of UU World, UUA President Peter Morales noted, I once asked a room full of lay leaders at a district meeting how many of them had felt ignored while visiting a UU congregation away from home. Almost all the hands went up. I winced. So many times in my work, so many times, too many times, I have felt that experience of walking into a congregation on a Sunday morning and not feeling welcomed. I'd like to share with you just one story, and this happens to be the latest story. A few weeks ago, a minister that I know invited me to come to her congregation anonymously and to prepare what she called a no-holds-barred report on what it was like to be a visitor in that congregation. And I happily said yes, because I had never been in that congregation and I had never heard the minister preach. So I showed up for the second service, and the foyer was really crowded, but the greeter recognized me as someone that was not sure where to go, smiled, had me sign the guest book, and then gave me some directions on where to go. What was uppermost in my mind was the bathroom. She gave me directions to the bathroom. I started, after using the bathroom, maybe this is too much information, I started walking down the hall, and I headed to the room where they have coffee. I didn't want coffee, but I wanted to pass as many people in the congregation as I could before the service started. As I'm walking down the hall, as I'm walking in the room, I'm making eye contact with everyone who passes me. Not one person smiled or nodded or said hello. I worked my way back to the sanctuary. I still had a few minutes to go before the service started, so I stood in the back to let more people come past me. Not one person said hello. Not one person smiled. Not one person nodded. I finally sat down about halfway up the aisle on the right-hand side. A member of the congregation a few moments later came and sat in the row in front of me. She turned around, smiled, and said, "Are you a visitor?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Welcome." I said, "It's too late." No, I'm kidding. I didn't really say that. I wanted to, but I really didn't say that. I said thank you, and we had a short conversation, and then the service started. It was a beautiful service. After it was over, I thanked the minister, and I headed back down the hallway, this time with intention to have some coffee. I walked into the coffee room. I've been around the block a few times, so I knew I had to head for the yellow mugs, signifying that I was a visitor. I filled it with coffee, I grabbed a couple of cookies, and I made my way to a corner of the room. Now, I was not hidden by any barriers. I wasn't hiding by anything. I was clearly visible. But I wanted to be in a corner of the room so that people could see that I was not engaged in conversation with anyone. I settled in. I held my yellow coffee mug way up high, and I stood there like that for about 10 minutes. Not one person came over to me. Not one. A few people kind of looked in my direction. Nobody acknowledged me. Nobody came over to talk to me. Eventually, after about 10 minutes, even that was too much for me. I finished my coffee, I put my yellow coffee mug away, and I headed back up the hall looking for the minister so that I could hide in her office until we had a series of meetings that were scheduled for later on. Folks, if I had been a visitor, a real visitor to that congregation, I would not have ever have gone back into that building. And I might have checked off Unitarian Universalism as a possible religious option for me as well. Let's not have people in our congregation experience that. Let's never have someone say that about our congregation. But welcoming the stranger in our congregations is just the first step. What we really need to do is create a sense of belonging for all of us. In his book, Community, The Structure of Belonging, Peter Block tells us to belong is to be related to and a part of something. It is membership, the experience of being at home in the broadest sense of the phrase. To belong is to know, even in the middle of the night, that I am among friends. Peter Block talks about several conversations that create a sense of community. One of them is ownership. The ownership conversation, he says, requires us to act as if we are creating what exists in the world. This requires that we believe in the possibility that our congregation is mine or ours to create, that each of us is cause, not effect. As a member of this congregation for nearly 20 years, I have held virtually every position imaginable, including 2 tours on the Board of Trustees, the second time serving first as Vice President and then as President of the Board. I've also headed the fund drive, taught religious education, served as auctioneer, participated in the Adult Faith Development Program. I've been a worship associate. I performed every year in Gilbert and Sullivan's Christmas Carol. And as of 2 weeks ago, I finally mustered the courage to make and serve coffee. Let's face it, I used to be a big mahaf in this congregation. But even today, when I approach the door of this congregation on a Sunday morning, I sometimes hesitate for a moment as I wonder whether this is where I belong, whether this congregation is still mine to create. Peter Block says that we have to realize that each time people enter a room, they walk in with ambivalence, wondering whether this is the right place to be. This is because they believe that someone else owns the room. Accountability, Block says, is the willingness to acknowledge that we have participated in creating the conditions that we wish to see changed. Community, he says, will be created the moment we decide to act as creators of what it can become. In this wonderful congregation, we must never lose sight of the need to remind all who enter this building that they are welcomed, that they are needed, and that they are accountable for creating our beloved community, that without them, the rest of us are diminished. Lesson learned number 3. Building our congregations without emphasizing our Unitarian Universalist theology and history is like starting a garden and filling it with artificial flowers. It may look pretty from a distance, but nothing is growing. Understanding who we are as Unitarian Universalists and how we wish to live out our UU faith is at the core of every successful congregation. And yet there are so many Unitarian Universalists who do not ponder this and who cannot articulate what our faith is or what it means to them. Many of you know this story. 2 years ago, I was leading a workshop here as part of the Adult Faith Development Program. The topic was, what do you say when someone asks you what Unitarian Universalism is? There was a 10-year-old girl in attendance who had come with her mother, and she raised her hand. A little surprised, I nonetheless eagerly called on her, and she said, I tell them I'm Jewish, it's easier. Here at UUCDC, there are several ways in which members can explore their spirituality and their identity as Unitarian Universalists. Small group ministry has been very popular. Our religious education classes for children talk about these issues all the time. Yet only 15% of our adult members attended an adult faith development class last year. So we have to do better. Our ability to clearly and enthusiastically articulate our faith to others not only strengthens our resolve as Unitarian Universalists, but might be so compelling to others that they may want to come and check it out for themselves. And this leads to lesson learned number 4. Congregations should get over their fear of the E word, evangelism. And this is something that Jen addressed so perfectly in her reflection this morning. Evangelism is a word that we UUs prefer not to be associated with, perhaps because it raises images of missionary work or a preacher delivering a fire and brimstone sermon. We think it intrusive and somehow immodest to engage in evangelistic activity. Yet spreading our faith and inviting more people into our fold should be a goal of all congregations. If we truly believe that we have discovered a life-saving faith, why wouldn't we want the world to know about it? It is moving from an introverted to an extroverted congregational personality, one in which we are not ashamed to tell the world who we are and what we believe. Here are just a few ideas on how you can do that. Put a UU decal on your car or home window. Wear UU jewelry. Use a UU coffee mug at work. Borrow one of the coffee mugs from here and take it to work. Write an article for a local newspaper about a church project in which you're involved. Tell a non-member about a provocative thought that you heard at church. Carry a 7 Principles card and give it to people when they ask about Unitarian Universalism, and Marilyn kindly put them out after the first service. So there are several out there for you to take. Participate in public witness activities as an identifiable group. There are many more ways. Perhaps you have an idea or two of your own. Lesson learned number 5. People do not join a congregation in the hopes that someday they will be blessed to make coffee for other members of the congregation. People do not join our faith with the idea of chairing a committee for the next 5 years, or working in the memorial garden, or helping to build a storage shed behind the sanctuary. Members join our congregations because they are hurting, or curious, or otherwise in need of a spiritual community. We need to help them find that first, before we ask them to schedule a meeting, or pick up a hammer, or bring cookies for coffee hour. The critical issue of involving greater numbers of members in congregational life is being addressed here in this beloved community. The Growth Through Service program, which was unveiled at the congregational meeting last week, is a creative and ambitious project that will transform the way in which we look at service and minister to the needs of others. And what underlies the project is our statement of theological grounding, which lifts service up as a sacred experience and calls on all of us to serve a higher purpose that is greater than our own individual needs. I am so proud to have been a part of this initiative, and I can't wait to see it in action, and I can't wait to tell the rest of the UU world about it. But Lori and Jody are asking me to hold up on that, and I'm certainly willing to do so. And so to the 6th and final lesson learned that I want to share with you this morning. Congregational polity does not mean congregational isolation. Healthy congregations do not go it alone. There is a district, a region, a national association out there that is ready and willing to support congregations in their efforts to become stronger and more vital. There are workshops and webinars, district assemblies and leadership days, racial justice conferences, arts and worship festivals. There is General Assembly this year in Louisville, Kentucky. I invite you to discover what is out there. It may just enhance both your understanding of Unitarian Universalism and your pride in being one. It may very well help you in your travels along your spiritual journey. Last week in his farewell sermon, at least for a short time, Reverend Peter told us how great he thought we were as a congregation. And now it's my turn. But please don't expect this every week. Mustering all the objectivity I can, and from the perspective of someone who has seen and heard an awful lot in my work as growth consultant, I can tell you with absolute certainty that we are one of the healthiest congregations I know. We have a beloved minister who is inspiring, smart, and empowering, a director of religious education who is loving and creative, a staff that is professional, competent, dependable, and responsive, leaders who are mature and wise, music that touches our heart and lifts our soul, and congregational members who roll up their sleeves and pitch in when they're needed. We manage conflict well, we believe in transparency and in the democratic process, and we keep our lines of communication open. But don't let my words go to your head. There are still challenges to be met. What we know is that change in a congregation is inevitable. We will face difficult decisions ahead. We'll face critical crossroads as we continue our journey toward wholeness as a congregation. We are a living organism, and if we don't keep growing, if we don't keep changing, then change will happen to us. Alan Cohen wrote, "It takes a lot of courage to release the familiar and seemingly secure to embrace the new. But there is no real security in what is no longer meaningful. There is more security in the adventurous and exciting. For in movement there is life, and in change there is power." And so I call on all of us, visitors and veteran members alike, as members of this beloved community, to keep moving, to be courageous, to continually embrace the new, to come together in love with a sense of openness and adventure, curiosity and excitement as we imagine a congregation and a future filled with possibilities. I close with the words of Walt Whitman, "However sheltered this port, and however calm these waters, we must not anchor here." I wish all of us good sailing. May it be so.